Thanks for joining me again today. Recently, the blood moon occurred on September 28th, 2015. Most people are calling this a tetrad, 4 blood moons in a row. On Jewish feast days, that would be on Passover and Yom Kippur. But it's really not a tetrad, it's a doublet. God confirms signs through doublet. You'll find this throughout the story of Joseph, you'll find it through the story of Job. You find it throughout the New Testament out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. And so we've had a doublet showing of the blood moons. First, according to the lunar calendar in 2014 for the Jewish festival calendar, and then according to the solar calendar in 2015. What does this signify? That's what this teaching is all about. Send me an email. Stay in contact. Study your Bible. Study to show yourself approved. God bless you. The title of this lesson is God's Chessboard. We're going to be reading primarily from Ezekiel 38, 39, sometimes Revelations. Here's the outline. God's chessboard, blood moon kickoff, Gog of Magog prophecy, the false prophet prophecies, church in Israel attacked, and Israel remnant rescued. Let's turn in our Bibles to Ezekiel 38. We're not going to read the whole chapter of Ezekiel 38 and 39, just this particular portion, which gives us the gist of this Gog-Magog prophecy that's about to, or is in fact occurring as we read our morning newspapers. Let's read it together. Yahweh God foretells, behold, I'm against you, Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws. I will draw you and your army out for a battle with all your armaments, a massive force, all of them in alliance with you, wielding weapons. Persia, Somalia, Libya joined this alliance, all of them equipped. Turkey and all of its friends, the Caucasus peoples, from the uttermost parts of the north with all their forces. Many nations will join your alliance. In the end time, you will be mustered to come against the land restored from war, the land whose people, the Jews, were gathered from many nations upon the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste. Gog has been set up and drawn down to the country of Syria, north of Israel. When God does a doublet, he does it right. In 2014 in Yom Kippur, there was a blood moon, just like there was in Passover 2014. In 2015, on September 28th, again, there was a blood moon, a very rare event. Now, we know that when God does things, he does things to confirm signs. And of course, the blood moon represents a time of trouble for Israel, but it also represents a time of trouble for the church. Let's just quickly review Psalm 19, Joel 2:31, Acts 2:19 through 20, and Revelation 6:12. In Psalm 19, the Bible tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show his handiwork of his hands. It also says that the day provides a word for the day, and the night declares wisdom for the night. Not using speech or language, the heavens don't have a voice that's heard, but it's seen. In Joel 2:29 through 30, or it gives us the timeline, how God will show wonders in heaven and earth, blood, fire, pillars of smoke. And of course, when he says in heavens, he's representing heavenly events. Blood would be the blood moon. Fire, of course, would be meteors or comets. And of course, smoke, the same thing. A pillar of smoke is a comet. He says the sun shall be turned into darkness, in verse 31, the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes or arrives. And so we see that the blood moon and the day of the Lord are linked together. Now, Peter repeats this in his Acts 2 sermon, which when the church was born, he repeats it in Acts 2:19 through 20, verbatim from Joel chapter 2, 31. And then, of course, we see in Revelation 6, in verse 12, we see that John sees that when the 6th seal is opened, there's a great earthquake. The sun becomes black as sackcloth of hair, meaning there's an eclipse, and the moon became as blood. Now we know that on September 28th, 2015, just like all the other blood moons, first there was an eclipse, and then the moon showed as red as blood. And so this is God's kickoff, his confirming sign that things are about to become a time of trouble for both Israel and the church. Vladimir Putin is in alliance with the Ayatollah of Iran. He has just located his new air base in the month of September, 225 miles north of Israel's border. It doesn't take very long for a fighter jet to travel 225 miles. So Gog receives his funding from Iran. How did he get the cash? From the $150 billion windfall from the Iran nuclear agreement that several nations have just negotiated. This frees up the sanction money and allows Putin to establish a base and pay for all the troops that he's going to muster. And you'll see at the end of this video that he's mustered 150,000 troops. Not only is Israel in trouble, but the church is now in trouble. The Roman Catholic Pope, the prophesied false prophet, has now emerged on the world stage to adoration and worship, even subduing political, Protestant, evangelical leaders in the USA. Note that a false prophet speaks deceptive blasphemies. These blasphemies from the false prophet originated in councils that were not found in the Bible. The Council of Nicaea, the Council of Trent, and Vatican II. This is trouble for the church because the church can become contaminated with the wine of fornication, that is, doctrines that are not found in the Bible. Scripture tells us that the day of the Lord will follow immediately after the Gog of Magog battle in Israel. This will result in a new age of peace. Now, this is also a time of incredible pressure on Israel. Notice what happens to the nations that are drawn to God's chessboard for this battle. Beginning in Zechariah 12:9, it says, "It shall come to pass in that day, I will seek to destroy all Gentiles that come against Jerusalem." Then God says again in Zechariah 14, verse 2, he says, "I'm going to gather all the Gentiles against Jerusalem in battle. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. But the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city." This has not happened yet. Many people think this belongs to the Roman occupation, but this particular prophecy has not been fulfilled. And again in verse 16 in Zechariah 14 it says, "And every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of the hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles." What is the Bible telling us? It is telling us that, in fact, Israel and Jerusalem will be occupied. There's going to be a great slaughter, a great Holocaust, a time of pressure that's unprecedented, even during the time of the Holocaust after World War II. But it's not just Israel's pressure. There's going to be a time of trouble on all nations. God has drawn all nations to come against Jerusalem because he has a plan. It's at this time there appears to be two remnants in Israel. The remnant of Israel itself, people who have not become born-again believers in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then there's a second group of remnant. These are the people of Israel that enter into the church, into the real gospel. A time of pressure and a time of war is what causes people to turn and look for a deliverer, to look for the Messiah. In the book of Revelation, you will also find a reference to Gog of Magog in Revelation 20, verses 7 through 10. This describes an end-time battle that occurs 1,000 years after the first Gog of Magog war that pressures Israel. This is a mysterious battle for the church, and this is after all of world history seems to have been concluded. It seems to be a final spiritual battle where Satan is delivered and sent to the lake of fire. At the end of each Gog of Magog war, there is a time of peace, a new age. There will be 1,000 years of peace after the Gog of Magog war in Israel. There will also be a new Jerusalem and a new earth after the 1,000-year period expires and a new Gog of Magog war breaks out that we read about in Revelation 20, verses 7 through 10. These are two separate wars. Don't be confused by what's written in Revelation 20 versus what's written in Ezekiel 38:39. During this time of pressure, we see that the remnant of Israel are going to leave the Old Testament Feast of Tabernacle booths and go into the church's brush arbor. We read about this in Zechariah 13:8-9. The Bible says, "It shall come to pass in all the land, said the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off in her, and shall be lost, but the third shall be left therein." Meaning, classic Judaism, classic Israel, 1/3 will survive. But he says, "I will put the third part into the fire. I'm going to refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. He shall put on my name, and I will hear him. I will say, my people, and he shall say, the Lord is my God." This is the time of Israel's redemption when she comes into the church under the pressure of Gog of Magog. Ezekiel 38:39 prophecy tells us that God himself puts a thought into Gog's mind. The thought is money, oil prices. That's what Putin needs. His country is broke. He needs the money from the oil windfall. What's going to happen from the release of sanctions on Iran to build his base to draft his men. The Lord is going to harden Gog's heart, just like he did to Pharaoh during the time of the Exodus. The Lord puts jaw hooks into Gog's face to draw him down to Syria. His purpose is to make him an international example of God's power and to reveal God in his full glory. God's other purpose is to demonstrate his personal sanctifying care and ownership over Israel. Again, he reveals himself anew to them and to the world, but this time he's going to reveal himself as the man, Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. How's God going to do it? He tells us in the scriptures that he's going to use the Seneca cherub battle plan that he's used before. You can read about this battle plan in Isaiah 37:36. It happened during the time of Hezekiah. What he did was God put confusion in the minds of the alliance that came with Syria, and they turned their swords one upon another for mutual self-destruction. God is not going to rain hail on them. He's just going to have them destroy themselves. Again, Gog and his alliance, his hordes, Iran, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Turkey, even the USA, are going to get into conflict with each other and eliminate each other in the Holy Land, but not before Israel comes under their pressure. And Israel then is caused to seek their Messiah. Other scriptures that tell us about the Gog-Magog war are found in Isaiah 10:12-34, 17:3-14, and Romans 11:26. These scriptures tell us that a man is going to be named the King of Syria. You'll find that Vladimir Putin is now the de facto king of Assyria. And we see that Assyria morphed into the country of Syria from the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement and concluded by the 1917 Balfour Declaration. Syria is Assyria for all practical purposes of this prophecy. The prophecy also foretells that Damascus will be destroyed. You can read about this in Ezekiel 17:1-3. God is not going to allow the country of Syria to go untarnished for this particular war. Also, an interesting bit of news commentary in September 2015, conservative pundits called Vladimir Putin the leader of Syria, the king of Syria. Prophecy is coming to pass before our very eyes. So let's summarize what's going on right now with the final blood moon, the doublet that occurred in 2015, September 28th. Gog, or Putin, is now the king of Syria. The green horse of Revelation, found in Revelation 6:1-8, has also arrived in Syria through Hezbollah, the proxy, and Iran is directly sending troops to the country of Syria, supposedly to support Bashar al-Assad, but their real mission is to spread Shia Islam and to raise oil prices. We also see that the false prophet emerged on the world stage. His deadly wound has been healed, the child pedophilia scandal, and also he's been reconciled to the Protestant Church through the 1994 ECT agreement. You could read about that in another session or teaching, and I'll be talking about that at another time. Finally, we see that the USA, Turkey, Jordan are also ordained to be destroyed by this inter-alliance fighting, along with Gog and his hordes. The United States is vulnerable right now, and we are economically weak. We are not going to be able to survive this battle. Finally, Israel is going to be invaded in a survival battle. It's the time of Jacob's trouble, and this pressure is going to result in a remnant of Israel to turn to Jesus Christ for a miraculous deliverance during Gog's Magog suffering. In other words, Jesus is going to return and redeem Israel as they turn to him. There will be a remnant of Jews, 1/3, but out of that 1/3 will come another remnant, a church remnant, a remnant of Jews who enter into the church and acknowledge Jesus to be their true Messiah. God's chessboard is set up. In the video that follows, several of these events have been picked up by news agencies. I've attached these to permit you to see prophecy being fulfilled before your very eyes, that the Gog-Magog war is going to occur here in the next few days, and that we are living in the time of the end. As Israel comes under pressure, the church will come under pressure as well. And we see that by a new movement to suppress Christianity and Christian values. There's a lot to know about Bible prophecy, and God has confirmed his word through several of the prophets of the Old Testament, including the prophets of the New Testament, meaning the writings of Paul in Thessalonians and Corinthians and the Apostle John through the book of Revelation. That we see that there's a distinction between the Jewish nation and, of course, authentic Christianity. We see that the Jewish nation is about to go under a time of pressure, and pressure always produces people who want to find God when they stop relying upon themselves. I hope you enjoyed this today. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
It is historically unprecedented. But what's also unprecedented is the utter passivity of the United States. The real story this week is what happened at the UN, where Putin essentially stepped in and took over Syria. He's now the leader. We had said 2 weeks ago, I think it was the Secretary of State, who said that the buildup of the Russians in Syria was doomed to fail. 2 weeks later, we have not only accepted it, we welcome it as a fight against ISIS, and we concede essentially that Assad will stay under the protection of the Russians. And the irony is that the Russians aren't in there to fight ISIS. The Russians are in there to support Assad, establish their predominance in the region, to bring in Iran, and to establish military facilities.
Support will be from the air without participation in ground operations.
But satellite images show temporary housing has been built for more than 1,500 Russian troops. Hundreds of those troops have already begun arriving in Syria. CENTCOM says U.S. warplanes will not comply with the Russian démarche. U.S. warplanes continued carrying out strike missions in northern Syria today, including one near Aleppo.
What we should be saying to Vladimir Putin is that you fly, but we fly anywhere we want to, when and how we want to, and you'd better stay out of the way.
This is dangerous. I mean, there's a very good possibility of something bad happening, even accidentally, like planes bumping into each other or friendly fire shooting the wrong plane down. What happened?
Well, once again, we're watching Putin, whose economy is in a tank, who's running out of money, who's got an inferior military by comparison to ours, outmaneuver and outbluff the President of the United States. That is actually what is happening here. And his calculation is this, Neil, simply this. He knows in his mind that President Obama will come back with verbal rhetoric, but actually be in fear of escalation and confrontation and do nothing. That's where we are. First of all, Putin is not here for ISIS. That's a false narrative. Putin is here to prop up the Assad regime because the Assad regime has been losing territory for the last year and also losing political support among the Alawites. The Iranians gave him that detailed information, and that's why this is all unfolding. The air attacks today 6 towns, 3 provinces, all along the Aleppo to Damascus corridor that the rebels have been closing down and denying Assad's forces to move along that corridor. This is all about supporting Assad and nothing more than that.
New reports that Iran is now sending thousands of ground troops into the region, and that Moscow simultaneously has drafted 150,000 more troops in its own country. What are we doing?
We're doing nothing. The administration is aimless, clueless, never had a strategy, and now is utterly humiliated.
After the murder of 6 million Jews, Iran's rulers promised to destroy my country, murder my people, and the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here, has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence. Deafening silence. Perhaps you can now understand why Israel is not joining you in celebrating this deal.
Mr. Speaker, the Pope of the Holy See.